Picture a palace of impossible opulence, the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg at the dawn of the 20th century. Its 1,000 rooms glitter with gold leaf and amber, crystal chandeliers hang like frozen waterfalls, and windows gaze out upon a city built to rival any in Europe. Here lives Tsar Nicholas II, ruler of 1/6 of the Earth's landmass, an autocrat with absolute power ordained by God. Yet, he is a man ill-suited for the role. He is shy, devoted to his family, and prefers the quiet routine of a country gentleman to the crushing weight of an empire. He sees Russia not as a roiling cauldron of industrial revolution and peasant hunger, but as a vast, holy family with himself as its benevolent father. His wife, the German-born Empress Alexandra, shares this gilded delusion. She is fiercely protective of her husband's authority and their 5 children, 4 beautiful daughters and a son who is the key to their future. They live in a bubble of unimaginable luxury, surrounded by servants, icons, and tradition, blissfully unaware that the foundations of their world are crumbling. The whispers of revolution are distant thunder, easily ignored within the palace walls. They believe their dynasty, which has ruled for 300 years, is as eternal as Russia itself. They perform ancient rituals, attend lavish balls, and review pristine military parades, convinced these are the true mechanisms of power. They cannot see the rot beneath the polish, the deep cracks spreading through the empire's facade. They are the last of their kind, prisoners in a golden cage of their own making, about to learn that love for one's family cannot save an empire from the tide of history. In 1904, the dynasty's prayers are answered. After 4 daughters, a son and heir is born, Alexei Nikolaevich. The empire rejoices. Cannons fire in celebration across St. Petersburg. Now, the 300-year-old Romanov line is secure. But joy quickly turns to ash. Within weeks, the infant prince suffers an unstoppable bleed from his navel. The terrified parents discover a truth they must hide from the world at all costs. Their precious son, the future of Russia, has hemophilia. The royal disease, passed down through the bloodline of Queen Victoria, Alexandra's grandmother, has found its way into the heart of the Russian autocracy. This single genetic flaw becomes the dynasty's central, fatal secret. Every fall, every bruise, every nosebleed is a potential death sentence for the boy. The sprawling palace becomes a padded cell. Sharp corners are covered, servants are instructed never to let him run, and his life is a constant oscillation between normalcy and agonizing, near-fatal bleeding episodes where his joints swell with blood, leaving him crippled with pain. This secret isolates the imperial family even further. They cannot trust doctors, who are powerless. They cannot trust the court, which would see the heir's weakness as a sign of a cursed dynasty. Alexandra, already mystical and devout, descends into religious desperation. She prays before every icon, consults every holy man, searching for a miracle. The secret of Alexei's condition is a poison that seeps into every decision, twisting the fate of not just a family, but an entire empire, making them vulnerable to any charlatan who promises a cure. Into this atmosphere of secret desperation walks a man who will seal their doom. He is Grigori Rasputin, a Siberian peasant, a wandering holy man with piercing, hypnotic eyes and a reputation as a healer and a debauchee. He is everything the refined, mannered St. Petersburg court is not: coarse, unwashed, and reeking of the common earth. To the aristocracy, he is an abomination. But to the Empress Alexandra, he is a miracle. During one of Alexei's worst bleeding episodes, when doctors have given up hope, Rasputin is summoned. He enters the sick room, sits by the boy's bed, and speaks in low, calming tones. He prays. Incredibly, the bleeding stops. Whether through hypnotism, calming the boy's stress, or sheer coincidence, it doesn't matter. Alexandra is convinced he is a man of God sent to save her son. Rasputin becomes her savior, her confidant, our friend. He is given unlimited access to the imperial family, the only person who can ease Alexei's suffering and Alexandra's terror. He sits with the children, offers spiritual advice to the Empress, and political counsel to the Tsar. The court is horrified. Rumors swirl of his drunken orgies, his control over the Empress, his corrupt influence on state appointments. He is a cancer in the heart of the government, but to the isolated Empress, he is the only thing keeping her son alive. She refuses to see the danger, believing the attacks on Rasputin are attacks on her faith and on God's will. The family's secret curse has given birth to a public monster. In August 1914, the world catches fire. The Great War begins, and Russia is swept up in a wave of patriotic fervor. The Tsar, seeing this as a holy mission to defend his Slavic brethren, feels his connection to the people renewed. Crowds cheer him in the streets of St. Petersburg, which is renamed the more Russian-sounding Petrograd. But the initial enthusiasm soon shatters against the brutal reality of modern warfare. The Russian army, vast but poorly equipped and led by incompetent aristocrats, is slaughtered on the Eastern Front. Millions die. The country's fragile infrastructure buckles under the strain. There are not enough rifles, not enough bullets, not enough food. Back home, grief and anger replace patriotism. In this moment of national crisis, Tsar Nicholas makes a catastrophic decision. In 1915, believing his divine presence will inspire the troops, he dismisses the army's commander-in-chief and takes personal command at the front. It is a gesture of profound folly. He is a strategist of no ability, and now every military defeat, every retreat, every death is laid directly at his feet. Worse, by leaving the capital, he creates a power vacuum. He leaves the governance of the vast, crumbling empire in the hands of his wife, the deeply unpopular German-born empress, who in turn is completely reliant on the advice of her holy man, Grigori Rasputin. The stage is now set for the final act of the tragedy. The Tsar is absent, the government is in chaos, and the people are starving, freezing, and dying for a war they no longer believe in. With Nicholas at the front, Petrograd becomes Rasputin's playground. Empress Alexandra, isolated and paranoid, trusts no one but him. She believes his counsel comes directly from God, a holy guide to help her protect her husband's throne. In reality, it is a disaster. Guided by Rasputin's whims and prophecies, she begins a chaotic reshuffling of the government. Competent, experienced ministers are dismissed overnight, replaced by Rasputin's corrupt and incompetent cronies. The government descends into chaos, a game of musical chairs known as ministerial leapfrog. One man is made Minister of the Interior because his wife pleaded his case to Rasputin. The war effort is crippled, the food supply system collapses, and the administration grinds to a halt. Whispers become roars. The public, already suspicious of the German-born empress, now believes she and Rasputin are actively sabotaging Russia, perhaps even spying for the Germans. They call her the German woman, a traitor controlled by a demonic peasant. The Tsar's own family members plead with him to return, to send Alexandra to a convent and banish Rasputin. He receives letters warning that the dynasty is on the brink of collapse. But from the isolation of the military headquarters, Nicholas trusts his wife's letters over the advice of his entire family and government. He dismisses the warnings as gossip and intrigue. While he plays at being a soldier, his empire is being dismantled from within by a desperate mother and a mad monk. By December 1916, the Russian aristocracy decides they must act. To them, the only way to save the monarchy is to destroy the man who controls it. A conspiracy is born, led by one of the richest men in Russia, Prince Felix Yusupov, and even involving the Tsar's own cousin. They see the murder of Rasputin not as a crime, but as a patriotic duty. They lure Rasputin to Yusupov's palace on the pretense of a late-night party. The story of his death becomes the stuff of legend, a testament to the man's almost supernatural vitality. First, they feed him cakes and wine laced with enough cyanide to kill a dozen men. He eats and drinks, but seems unaffected. Panicked, Yusupov shoots him in the chest. Rasputin collapses. As the conspirators prepare to dispose of the body, he leaps up, roaring, and attacks them, staggering out into the frozen courtyard. They shoot him again and again. Finally, they bludgeon him into submission, bind his body, and throw him through a hole in the ice of the Neva River. When his body is recovered days later, coroners find water in his lungs, suggesting he was still alive when he hit the freezing water. The conspirators are hailed as heroes by the public, but their desperate act comes too late. They believed that by removing the demon, they could save the institution. They were wrong. They had only removed a symptom of the disease. The true sickness, autocratic weakness, societal collapse, and the people's fury was now terminal. Rasputin's death didn't save the monarchy. It only made its fall inevitable. The winter of 1917 is the coldest in memory. In the streets of Petrograd, the people have reached their breaking point. There is no bread, no fuel, no hope. The murder of Rasputin changed nothing. On International Women's Day, February 23rd, thousands of women from the textile factories pour into the streets, chanting for bread. They are soon joined by striking male workers from the massive Putilov steel plant. The protests swell. The government, rudderless, orders the army to disperse the crowds. But the soldiers, themselves peasants and workers in uniform, are weary of war and sympathetic to the people. After a few days of hesitation and minor skirmishes, the unthinkable happens: the regiment's mutiny. Soldiers shoot their own officers and join the revolution. The symbols of the autocracy are torn down. Statues are toppled, imperial eagles are smashed, and police stations are burned. The city falls into the hands of the people. The Tsar, still at his military headquarters hundreds of miles away, receives fragmented telegrams. He dismisses the uprising as a minor, hooligan movement that will quickly pass. He orders a detachment of loyal troops to retake the capital, not understanding that he no longer has any loyal troops. The revolution is not a conspiracy or a riot. It is a spontaneous, elemental explosion of a people's rage. For 300 years, the Romanovs had ruled with an iron fist. Now that fist had opened, and there was nothing inside. The entire edifice of power, which seemed so solid just weeks before, dissolves in a matter of days. While his capital burns, Nicholas II finally tries to return, but is too late. His imperial train is halted and diverted by revolutionary railway workers, shunted onto a siding at Pskov station. He is a prisoner on his own railway. There, in the dim light of a train carriage, representatives from a new provisional government meet him. They do not bow. They do not call him Your Majesty. They lay the stark reality before him. The army will not support him. The government has collapsed, and the only way to save Russia from civil war and defeat to the Germans is for him to abdicate. Nicholas, the man who believed his power was a sacred trust from God, is utterly broken. He looks around for support, but finds none. His generals, his advisors, his ministers all urge him to step down. For hours he paces the carriage, smoking, agonizing. He first considers abdicating in favor of his son, Alexei, but realizes the boy's fragile health means he would be separated from his family. He cannot bear this. In the end, his love for his family triumphs over his love for his throne. On March 2nd, 1917, using a simple pencil on a standard piece of paper, Nicholas II signs away 300 years of Romanov rule. He writes in his diary that night, "All around me is treachery, cowardice, and deceit." He is no longer Tsar of all the Russias. He is simply Colonel Nicholas Romanov, a private citizen, a husband, and a father, now at the mercy of the revolution he failed to prevent. The family's fall from grace is swift and total. First held under house arrest in their palace, they are then transported like common criminals across Russia to the remote Siberian town of Tobolsk, and finally to Ekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains. Their final prison is a commandeered merchant's house, grimly renamed the House of Special Purpose. The gilded cage has been replaced by a true prison. The windows are painted over. High wooden walls are built to block any view of the outside world, and they are guarded by rough, hostile Bolshevik soldiers who delight in tormenting their former rulers. The family's life shrinks to 4 small rooms. The Tsar chops wood for exercise. The Empress and her daughters mend clothes and try to maintain a sense of dignity. Alexei, his health failing, is often carried or pushed in a wheelchair. They read to each other, play simple games, and pray. In these final months, stripped of all power and luxury, they are perhaps more of a family than they ever were before. They are sustained by a faint hope of rescue, of asylum in England, unaware that their fate is being debated in Moscow by Lenin and the Bolshevik leadership. To the Bolsheviks, the former Tsar is a dangerous symbol, a potential rallying point for the anti-communist white armies now fighting a brutal civil war. They cannot allow him to be rescued. The House of Special Purpose is not a holding cell. It is a waiting room for death. In the early hours of July 17, 1918, the end comes. The family and their few remaining servants are woken and told to dress. They are informed that fighting is approaching the city and they must be moved to the cellar for their own safety. They descend the stairs, confused but compliant. Nicholas carries the ailing Alexei in his arms. They are arranged in 2 rows in the small, empty cellar, as if for a photograph. The commandant, Yakov Yurovsky, enters with his execution squad. He pulls out a piece of paper and reads a short, brutal declaration. The Ural Soviet has sentenced them to death. The Tsar, stunned, turns to his family and manages to stammer, "What?" before Yurovsky shoots him point-blank. The room explodes in a deafening barrage of gunfire and smoke. It is a chaotic, brutal butchery. The girls, who had sewn jewels into their corsets, are partially protected, and the panicked executioners resort to bayonets and rifle butts. Within minutes, 300 years of Romanov rule ends in a blood-soaked cellar. Their bodies are taken to a remote forest, burned, doused in acid, and thrown into an unmarked pit. For decades, their fate becomes a myth, fueling legends of survivors like Anastasia. But their real legacy is a lesson written in blood, a story of how a dynasty, blinded by tradition, isolated by privilege, and undone by a private family tragedy, became so disconnected from its people that it failed to see the abyss opening beneath its feet until it was too late. The echoes from that cellar are a timeless warning about the price of power without understanding.